Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we kick this off, I do want to remind everyone that we will be taking questions during the Fireside Chat today. So if any come up during the discussion, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type in your questions, and we'll get to them after the discussion. I'd now like to turn this over to Force Family CEO Steven Saltzstein, who will be moderating our discussion today. Steve?
Thank you, Harvey. And thank you, everyone, for being with us today. We greatly appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. We have a fantastic discussion with the CEO of 5E Materials, all about the future of U.S. critical minerals policy. And we are more than honored to have Curtis Hébert, who was the chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission under both the Clinton and Bush administrations, FERC. And so to begin with, Kurt, because I'm not going to do it justice, do you mind just giving us 1 minute on your background so that everyone knows, a bit about yourself? That would be great.
Yeah, happy to do that. And again, my name is Kurt Hébert. I was former chairman and commissioner at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Prior to that, I'd served at the Mississippi Public Service Commission as both chairman and commissioner. And prior to that, obviously a practicing attorney who was a member of the House, chairman of the Oil and Gas Committee. I've been in energy my entire life. I actually, other than energy and financial markets, that's where I spend my time. And when I left FERC, I went to Entergy Corporation, Fortune 250 company, was executive vice president there. And as you know, for the first year when I left there, I couldn't do anything at FERC. There was a prohibition. So I helped lead an effort to exit our European assets in London, Sofia, Bulgaria, Italy. And then we transitioned into purchasing nuclear plants, which we did, merchant nuclear plants, and added to our fleet, and was there basically for a decade, and then left there and went back as a partner with my firm, Brunini, but have since joined the board of 5E and helping 5E move forward with everything they're trying to do to make certain they understand the criticality behind having boron as a critical mineral, why that's important to the markets, why that's important to the American public. But anyway, that's my background. Undergrad in pre-law, then law, then did my nuclear piece at MIT. So been around a little bit.
Okay,
Yep.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're honored to have you. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself and 5E, please.
Sure. Paul Weibel, I'm the CEO of 5E. Been with 5E almost 4.5 years now. Was the CFO for the first 3 or so, and got put into the CEO role in June of 2024. I joined 5E because there's a really strong pool side demand thematic in the space. Boron is very much a bit of an unknown, but that's starting to change. Mineral. It's the fifth element on the periodic table, and it's critical in making life as we know it exist today. It's definitely a growing market. That's pulling prices higher, and at the same time, there's constraints on the supply side where it's a global oligopoly, and that 85% of global supply is two companies, and so one of those companies, his costs are going up, and ultimately that's putting pressure on, the supply side to raise prices. So it's actually fundamentally, from a mineral space, a true need for a new boron producer globally. And we sit in California. We're a US based. Our project is about halfway between LA and Las Vegas. The project sits 2 miles off of Interstate 40 with all of our major mining permits, and we've actually been doing this for about 2 years now. Come January, we'll hit the 2-year mark of mining, albeit it's that pilot plant, kind of de-risking, but really setting us up to scale commercially in late 2028 and come online and be a cash flow generating entity for 100+ years to come.
Can you tell people, like, what is boron used for, and why is it a critical mineral?
Yeah, so we'll get into the criticality of it because the Department of War definitely gets it, because boron is pervasive across many defense applications, from munitions to coatings to armor to semiconductors to the permanent magnets. Boron is pervasive. Department of War cannot operate without boron and its various specialty derivatives. One of the, and we'll get into what our strategy as a company, but what Kurt's been critical in helping us unlock is really getting that broader message out to Department of Interior, Department of Energy. But boron, it's a super mineral. It's light, heat resistant, energy dense. It actually goes into fertilizers as a micronutrient. So it kind of it's a well-rounded athlete, so to speak. And and it goes into some really boring, not that sexy materials. Solid base laundry detergent when I was cleaning my clothes in college is borax. All forms of glass, and then the specialty applications, and specifically the magnets, and that's where you're seeing higher growth on the boron side.
Yeah, but I just want people to understand. You said it, but I really want to get detailed about it. I find it unbelievable how few mining sites there are today. And one of the largest is at risk because, I mean, essentially it's kind of an old form of mining that is going to be in a situation where it's no longer profitable. Can you just talk about the scarcity just of the mining sites? I really want to make it black and white for folks.
So I kind of, as I alluded, this is a global oligopoly, and you can draw the parallels to the lithium market maybe 15 years ago. That market, there was Rockwood Lithium, which was eventually acquired by Albemarle. They had Chilean as well as Australian operations. You had Tanchi, who's the Chinese. You had SQM, who was a Chilean producer, and then FMC, which eventually spun out in the form of Livent. There's really like four. And for the lithium market, it was this really simple, poolside demand, prices are going to go higher. And that's driven by electric vehicles. So seeing the demand side was pretty easy because of the lithium ion battery. On the boron side, very similar kind of dynamics. There's poolside demand, but it's not just 1 + 1 is 2 lithium ion batteries. Boron does go into the lithium ion battery, but that's like a piece of it. It also goes into nuclear, it goes into semiconductors, it goes into defense. It's like diverse. And so it's growing in many different diverse ways. And it's really a little bit because it's this it's a bit of an opaque market. And that's why, like, relative to the lithium market, where there was four, there's only two on the boron supply. And fast forward, like today, there's hundreds of lithium projects. And like a lot of projects kind of need 20,000 or $20 a kg, 20,000 a ton to kind of get going and be economic. And what you really actually see today on the lithium market is some really big players. You have starting to get into it, specifically Rio. They did the acquisition of Arcadia. They have the joint venture down in Chile. And then you have Exxon dipping their toe in Smackover. You have Equinor with Standard on DLE and Smackover. And what that at least telegraphs to me is these are big companies that are not afraid of CapEx at the expense of reliable IRR, and ultimately deploying a little bit more CapEx for maybe a 14% IRR, so you can get really low on the cost curve. And like my prediction is that, for the lithium market, if you're good on the cost curve, that's, those are going to be the winners. And but you then compare that where there's a lot of lithium projects today on the boron side, there's 5 global deposits globally that could be economic mines. And if you look at them, well, you have the Turks, they're the existing Turkey, and then there's a California-based Rio project 70 miles up the road for 5E. Those two account for 85% of global supply. The Rio project, which is under strategic review now, has been around for about 100+ years. So their costs are going up as they deplete down. That was also on the back of a reserve downgrade in 2018. Outside of that, there's like, listen, you do have a couple smaller producers in South America. That tends to be very captive to the South American market, more used for the fertilizers. And, but there's only 5 sizable deposits. 3 are based in Serbia, 2 are based in the US. 2 do have their permits, but only 1's been operating a demonstration plan and fully de-risking this operation for the last 2 years, and that's ultimately 5E.
Kurt, can you talk about, why it's so important to get on the critical minerals list and what it takes to get there?
Yeah. We're on the Department of War, Department of Defense list. As Paul indicated, they understand the importance of it. They know it's critical to their needs and to the United States strategic defense. We had applied back in 2023 to the Department of Energy list. Again, a different administration then, a different thought of what's important and how we move forward. We missed it by 1 point. We scored 21 out of 22. We have since filed comments, and those comments we think are being heard. We've had quite a few meetings with administrative officials as well as congressional members and customers who are helping us make certain that everyone understands how important this is. So I think we will get on the Department of Energy list. And then lastly, the third list, and I know, the first thing that people say when you say the third list, they're like, why is there not 1 list? Why are there 3 lists? What are we doing here?
Right. So is that like the critical materials list versus
Yes, it is. For
Yeah,
the
can you
Department
explain
of
that?
Interior.
Yeah.
Yeah. They asked for comments, the Department of the Interior. We filed comments. The last time that we had done that, 5E was the only group who had filed any comments. This time, of the comments that have been filed, there are already 9 others that have filed comments on why boron is a critical mineral and should be so recognized by the Department of the Interior. And then there are a group of comments that have not been made public yet. I think maybe close to 100, Paul, if I remember right. And so we don't even know who all's on that list and what they may have been said in those comments. But you've got customers that are important. Corning, for instance, filed comments, and we know that they're being very positive about what needs to be recognized and why. They understand the significance of this. And what it takes to get it done, I'll go there and then I'll kind of come back to a couple of things. But it's interesting, Paul and I have had these discussions, and it's why we've had so many meetings with administrative officials at Department of Energy and Department of the Interior and congressional members, getting them to send letters and make phone calls to say, hey, this is important. Previous administrations, typically, if you look at, there are really 2 sides to an agency, right? They're the political appointees, and then they're the career, right? So the career people, we call them kind of in the business, it's kind of funny, we call them the weebies. We'd be here before you got here, and we'd be here when you gone. And that's the reality of it, right? Because they are.
Sure.
So you have to, when it comes to the edification process, you have to educate both sides there. And in former administrations, the science really kind of just held the day, right? It was all about science and just about science. And here, whereas, Paul covered that well scientifically why we need to be there, this administration understands the economics, why it's important from an economic point of view for us to have minerals that are so recognized as being critical, because they are critical to the American economy. And
when you say economics, though, are you really saying security?
Or
or is it actually two separate things?
Well, I would say it's 3 things. I would say it's a 3-legged stool. I would say it's the criticality and the importance there that you former mentioned. It is the reliability of the product, right? If we've got something that's in another nation or in another country that might be in an area that we have concern about, in Turkey, in China, if we have those, then we would have a reliability issue. We have what we might call a single point of failure, right? where we have a real situation, they shut us down, we can't get things done. And then on the back side of it is cost. Cost is always an issue to everyone, whether it's the original customer or the end consumer. And so you've got to look at all three of those. And when it comes to looking at all three of those, the security, the reliability, and the cost, boron has to be recognized as a critical and strategic mineral, right? So it meets all of those tests. And we just think it's a matter of time before they do that. We feel very positive about where this is going. We feel very positive with the feedback we're getting, not only from the careers, but also from those that have been politically appointed that are driving this administrative train on economics. So we feel really good about it.
Paul, if you get on the list, what are the tangible benefits? What are the practical benefits of being on the list?
Yeah, I think the first is a positive affirmation that what we've been saying is it is critical. U.S. government, listen, boron sits on the UK's critical mineral list as well as the European, and listen, they're a stone's throw from Turkey. So I think it's definitely positive affirmation, and I think a lot of it has been about the science across previous administrations, and you look at so right now you saw a recent announcement where Orion has teamed up with DFC. There's whispers that Office of Strategic Capital is going to team up with another private fund entity and maybe potentially XM. And because listen, Trump wants to it's mineral security, but like there's an economic aspect, and I'll kind of tie back to your question to Kurt. Listen, like I don't know if jobs are coming back to the US, but I can tell you like we're going to create 150 plus jobs in California in an area of high unemployment and high poverty. And that's because, well, we have a resource that we're going to be able to extract, and we're going to need workers, and we will bolster local economic activity, and so we can create jobs. So there's that aspect of it from an economic perspective. But I think when Trump says, hey, we need to build mining projects in the US, he's then going to go and go to Congress and say, hey, I need you to appropriate. Well, Congress's path of least resistance to appropriate is, well, we'll appropriate based on the USGS's critical minerals list. And then, so what it means to get boron on there is, one, it's going to be cheaper agency financing cost. Usually then there's preferential treatment. You can get lower interest rates, longer tenor debt. We've been working with customers. We've pitched offtake now with a couple customers, and they don't like the price. And well, it's the price to get a new mine online in California and in this country. And I think the customers realize the supply and demand, it's pretty stark. And ultimately, there's the chance your customers are looking down it could be a Turkish monopoly, which is not very good. And so, if you take the 130,000 tons we'll produce, on a cost per ton end of the first 2-3 years, you're about $300 to $350 a ton on principal and interest on a $285 million LOI. And I know that's one of the questions on the audience is like, well, how it's a big CapEx number. I would argue, yeah, we're $435 million in capital. There's $1 billion plus CapExes out there. And we have a letter of interest from XM, which is $285 million. Listen, if you can get critical minerals and extend tenure out on that, you can go from $350 a ton closer to $200 a ton, which really helps us be more competitive in the broader landscape, because we got to pay for our capital. There's no way around it. So I think that's the biggest tool. Additionally, I think it's affirmation that, okay, boron's a critical mineral. When you look at what other projects can come online, like we're the only pure play way to play boron in the stock market. And so if you want exposure to the boron market and this up and coming mineral that has really tough supply demand fundamentals, we're the only pure play way to play it. And by the way, we're like pretty close to construction ready.
Yeah, and Stephen,
Oh,
I will just piggyback on that a little bit just to say, and Paul said it, but I mean, you know that the capital markets pay attention to this. And so when they see something like this, hey, you've been added to the Department of Energy, you've been added to the Department of the Interior, they know that there are a lot of good things going on. There's some certainty here, and that will just really advantage this market space that we're playing in.
Yeah, so can you talk about that further? This is really a question for the both of you, but so can you talk about AI, the boom of data centers, how we're going to generate power for those data centers? You know, you mentioned nuclear, et cetera, and how that plays into the 5E story.
Kurt, do you want to maybe give an overview? I can hit on kind of the boron's piece in that, but do you want to just maybe talk about, because you're more familiar with the nuclear space than I am.
Sure, sure. Happy to. Look, I don't have to tell you, Stephen, nuclear plants are difficult to build. They're difficult from a regulatory, which is where I spend 90% of my time, space. They're difficult from a financial. Let's look at what we know right now, what we have just behind us that we can take a rearview mirror and look at. The Southern Company system there in Georgia. I think it was scheduled to go on at about 16.5 billion, if I remember right. Ended north of 30. So when it comes to these, large nuclear power plants, you have to ask yourself, one, are we going to build any more of those? And then secondly, if we do build any of those, and I'm talking about a 500 to 1,000 megawatt type system, whether it's a pressurized water reactor or some of the newer, but you're likely not going to build any of those large ones, in my view, unless it's a regulated entity, because you're not going to have merchant players come out here who have everything at risk, who get no guaranteed return to go out and spend that kind of money, right? I mean, that's an extremely long play. I mean, Paul mentioned Exxon. I mean, those are the big guys. Those are the kind of plays only that they can make. And these other merchant players, which are significantly smaller, they just can't do it. So if you're going to have the large ones, it's going to be in the regulated space. The smaller ones, if we can move forward with the small modular reactors, I think you're going to see something the 50 or the 100. There's less piping. It's an entirely different system. One of the things we always get into with nuclear energy, right, is what about the safety of nuclear power? And let me answer that, because not everyone who's watching this may understand, of the 103 active reactors we have right now in the United States for nuclear power purposes, if you took their spent nuclear fuel, let's go there first, and you stacked it 15 yards high, it'd be one football field. It's not the amount of nuclear spent fuel that most people think it is. Secondly, understand that can be reprocessed. We're not doing it in the United States. We should be doing it in the United States, just like we should be reprocessing and processing boron. There's so many things that we should be doing that I think we will be doing toward the end of this administration, if we can get the answers that we need to get, and I think we will. But if you look at that and then you think back on, what makes nuclear power so scary, you've never had one individual in the United States of America that has died due to a nuclear accident. 3 Mile Island, which is the worst one we ever had, the public was unharmed. You did have a melting of the core. You did have security measures that took place. So you can go in and you can build these smaller systems, and they're much safer, even with all the redundancy and all the safety we have right now with nuclear power throughout the United States, which, by the way, other countries don't have, but we do have it here. I think you will have those smaller systems. You're going to have those smaller systems, especially for these data centers, because the data centers rely on just being constant. They need that constant energy. They cannot have any interruption. And the best way you're going to get that is through some good baseload type of service, which nothing beats nuclear power when it comes to that.
Right.
But we're
Now,
going
it's
to have the
interesting.
federal government come forward and help us get some quick answers. And I think you're going to see that.
One question I had in the back of my mind was, I didn't understand why the administration was, it seemed as though, so in favor of nuclear and really not in favor at all of wind and solar. But I think you just probably answered the question, which is the consistency of the power outlet or power output, I should say. Is that the issue?
Yeah, and I'm not a just say no person when it comes to wind or solar, and I'm a kind of, let's say yes to everything. You know, there's a time and a place, right? There are places where solar really works well. There are places where wind really works well, and at certain periods. And the real issue behind both of those is the storage, right? The backup, the battery storage. How can we retain that power? Because we can't use it right then when it's produced necessarily.
Right.
But
Right.
that is the difference in nuclear. And so when it comes to the administration and how I think the administration is viewing this, I do think the administration is a say yes to everything, but understanding everything has limitations. But with nuclear, what you get that good reliability factor from it being a good base load is zero emission. If we want to put climate into the equation, it emits nothing. So it's far superior to anything else when it comes to that type question than anything else we have. But I think they'll get those questions answered, and I think you will see hopefully some shovels in the ground soon on these SMRs.
We looked at, like, we're a perfect candidate for solar because we sit up in the Mojave Desert and it's like, it never rains. It's sunny every day. You're above the clouds at our elevation. But we're a chemical plant that needs to run 24/7. So we can't, you got to then
Right.
in battery storage and it get, so, I think we've talked to a couple of the SMRs about, do we down the road, is this a solution? We're blessed that we have not gas, but I think it's definitely relevant for the data centers, which boron and the AI, which boron definitely plays its part. I think so. First, boron touches the semiconductors, so it's critical there. And then in the next generation computing, you need boron nitride for those high-end super quant computers. So
Is that true? Really?
or
Okay.
it has its place there.
Right.
And then
Interesting.
nuclear reactors don't happen without boron. Boric acid is actually a key ingredient in stabilizing the nuclear reactor. And it's funny because so public comments were due for the critical minerals list on September 25th. And it wasn't a surprise. And this is one of the reasons we got Kurt on our board, was because he was involved with people that were high up on Trump's transition team. And ultimately, I had spent probably the last 2.5 years talking to the Weebies. And in January, I was down at USGS in Reston. I was like, boron doesn't have a chance to get on the critical minerals list. And I was like, we need to change our strategy. And that's when we brought Kurt to the board. And I think we're in a really good spot to actually get boron now in critical minerals. And so it wasn't on the draft list, which was fine. We didn't think it would be. And we had talked to some of the people in Interior, and they said, you need to submit the public comment. And we had also kind of walked them through our case, and they got it. They got the economics. They understand the single source of failure in the US we have today. But what was really interesting is that when you look at you can go to the Federal Register. This is all public. You got to, it's not the easiest to navigate, but you go to Federal Register, you look, and you can get to Interior's, USGS, and public comments. There's 240 public comments. There's 160 that are public. There's a reconciling difference there now. But you can search for boron, or you can search for different groups, and you can read their public comments. So of those 160, there was 9 public comments for boron. We were obviously one of them. So you can go read our public comment, search 5E, there it is. But what's great about this is that 3 years ago, it was 1 and it was only 5E. Now it's 9. So the echo chamber is starting to get louder. And so we kind of hit this generic comment that was talking about all the critical applications: glass, nuclear, defense, micronutrients. And all of a sudden, this echo chamber has been supported with, well, 3M came in with a public comment highlighting that boron should be on the critical minerals list because of its criticality in nuclear. The National Mining Association and the American Exploration of Mining Association, basically the two premier mining associations, also came in saying Rio Tinto's for sale right now, and their costs are up. Like, hello, like we're single sourced. Another group came in and said, like, 85% of boron carbide for defense applications runs through China. Hello, wake up. And then also, by the way, if Rio's not there, the whole world is single sourced on Turkey. So
Right.
echo chamber was definitely getting louder. And I think the market doesn't see it. Or, I mean, we weren't on the draft list. So, answering like one of the catalyst questions that's in the chat here is, I think we're going to get boron on the final critical minerals list, and I don't think the market sees it coming.
Yeah, and
I mean,
Stephen,
Kurt, can I ask you a question,
No, go
which
ahead.
is like, from my perspective, a layman's perspective, the fact that there's really basically only 2 producers in the world, and one of them is a part-time friend, let's just put it that way. I mean, it just seems to me to be like such a obvious candidate to be on this list. I don't understand like why it wouldn't even make it. Like, we need this in order to function as a, economic superpower.
Yeah, you're actually you're reading our mail. I mean, we're right there with you. So we get it. But yeah, and that's really a lot of what we have heard from the people that we have sat down with. The edification process takes time. When you open their eyes to, where it sits as a mineral, and then where it sits economically. And we had a couple of folks in the administration who, and Paul will remember these. I don't want to name names. It's not important to do that, but what's important is for them to recognize, and they did, and they turned and said, well, we had no idea. Can you please put some of this information in comments?
Right.
This is not being heard. And let me say the other thing about this edification process that's been invaluable and very important. Paul is very different from most of the people I've worked with in the chemical, the nuclear, all of that territory. When we were relicensing nuclear plants, I can tell you sometimes some of the chemical and nuclear engineers, trying to get them to educate people and properly communicate in a way that people could understand, it was difficult. It was, and it's a rare find. I mean, in Paul here, and thank goodness he's CEO right now. I mean, for a CEO like Paul to be able to sit down and kind of dumb it down for them a little bit and say, here's what we're talking about, and the women and the men in the administration in the WEB, the career group, they hear this and it makes sense. So, Paul, all these meetings, and he's running a company while he's going back and forth with us and having meetings, whether it's in person or on video. Those things take time. Prep takes time. So it's extraordinary, and we would not be there but for having a rock star like Paul to be able to come in. It's one thing for Kurt to say it. It's another thing for the CEO of the company who has been CFO and has been down there and understands the business.
I just want to say one thing, which was, in high school, I was a wrestler, but I was a bad wrestler. Okay. Paul wrestled at Lehigh, which is also coincidentally, or maybe not so much now, one of the best engineering schools in the country. So he kind of like, I think is this great merger of discipline, tenacity, never giving up, and also like he can communicate. So I think he's kind of like he's kind of like top of the communication team for all the engineers across the country. It
That's
just
right.
makes me anyway. So there you go. So hey, by the way, how did like Kurt? Why did you join the company? Like, how did that all happen?
Paul, another member of the board, and an investor in the company, all asked me to join, and I'll be right up straight with you. When I looked at the company at first and I'd seen where it had been, I was not optimistic. Uh, and
Yeah,
so I went in kind of thinking, this was not going to be a great journey, but it has been an extraordinary journey. Matter of fact,
yeah,
I told one of the primary investors the other day, or I say the other day, a couple of weeks ago, exactly that when I was looking at groups, I kind of had 5E on the back end. I've got them on the front right now. I mean, they really
yeah.
are doing extraordinary things.
And I really think so much of that is because of Paul.
It is.
I can't tell people enough how hard driving and just focused he is in a
Yeah,
very
he's got a
impressive manner.
strong team around him. He's created a great culture there, whether it's those of us who are helping him externally or what he's doing with operations and internal functions of the company. Doing absolutely wonderful. And at the end of the day, I mean, Stephen, when I know different people have these, everything from these algorithms now that everybody plugs in to kind of see how many iterations we're going to do in a company and what's it mean and should I invest. To me, at the end of the day, it's about two things. When you look at a company, I look at cash, I look at people, and no debt on this company, strong
Yeah,
leadership, extraordinary. So
yeah,
good
I
things.
agree. I
Yeah,
agree. Let's turn it over to some audience questions.
yeah, well, let's get to the audience questions. It's not just about me. Like, I was fortunate that the first 2.5, 3 years, I spent a lot of time understanding the project history. I actually buddied up with our process engineers, chemical engineers, who really listen. I can't do a mass and energy balance. They can, but I then can apply the utilization and understand how it's going to drive the business. But we have a really good team, whether it's our ops team up in Newberry, on the commercial team, talking to customers, our finance and accounting folks. And we're a smaller company, about 35 people, but I think everyone here wants to do something great and knows how actually great of a resource we have here, and that they believe there's a true fundamental desire or need in the market to see this project come online at commercial scale, and that's why we're all here. And I think the mining space. There's a lot of bad actors out there, and people, investors get burned, and this is underpinned by a very large resource, and we've been mining it for 2 years and basically demonstrating that it is real. We've shipped 20 tons of product to Southeast Asia, and we know how to do it. So that's been the core, and I can't be where I am without a team. And we've kind of matured over the last 3 or 4 years, and we're really set up for success. So let's get the audience questions.
I have no
Great.
doubt. Harvey, take it away.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. And thank you guys. Wow, what an interesting discussion. Let's start out. Kurt, you've spent years shaping U.S. energy policy. From your perspective, how does the strategic importance of critical minerals today compare to the oil and gas industry in the 70s?
Oh, I think it is on parallel. I do. The interesting thing about that question is, I mean, who would have thought it, right? Who would have thought that at this time, even if you look at the financial markets, that things like boron and gold and other are in the space, and people are talking about it. You can turn on almost any financial channel, and you're going to see some discussion around critical minerals. Now, this administration has a lot to do with that because they have pushed this forward to say, we recognize that this has to be done, that this is going to pay dividends for decades if we get it done. It's also going to cost us for decades if we don't get it done. So That's the same mindset we had, right? When it came to drilling and when it came to pipes, when it came to decontrol, all of the things that led us to where we are with energy policy today. And an interesting thing too that I might mention, we really haven't had changes to the Energy Policy Act since '05. It's been a pretty dry spell, you're 20 years. And so you have to think that the House, Senate, the administration, somehow something's going to be pursued. I know Secretary Wright is really out there pushing things at the Department of Energy, and I know Secretary Burgum is as well at the Department of the Interior. So I would think all of them coming together, putting a package together, what we could get done in the near term would be important.
Great, thank you. And we've touched on this in the discussion, but the U.S. and its allies have made supply chain security our priority. How dependent are we today on foreign sources of boron and lithium, and what role do domestic producers have to play?
Yeah, I think on the let's talk the boron side. So if you go to export-import data, we're actually an exporter today of boron. And that's because, well, 20% of global supply does come out of boron, California. Mm-hmm. And I think, the telltale is if you go and look at audited financials, which are out there, costs are up pretty significantly over the last, 6 to 7 years. So, that there's been a bit of a false sense of security. And if you want to start to have that longer term outlay, listen, it's good that we produce here and we export, but we need to continue that for generations to come. And there's just very few other boron reserves globally or projects that could come online. So there's been this bit of a myth of abundance, and that's far from the case, and why it's a bit under the radar. On the lithium side, like, the United States really doesn't have any lithium producers. You have Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in Nevada, but maybe they produce 3,000 tons a year. There is no lithium production in the United States. It's predominantly on the mining side, driven by Australia as well as Chile and Argentina. But again, midstream's dominated by the Chinese on that conversion capacity. So I think, one, you need reliable supply and security on the upstream, but then it's that further processing. And so a great example on the boron supply is that China dominates the boron carbide market. 80 to 85% of boron carbide comes from the Chinese. And we've partnered with a company in the United States that actually is working on the midstream. So 2 weeks ago, we shipped about 1,000 pounds, 25 kilogram bags of boric acid that went into that company's process, where they're working on successfully piloting armor grade boron carbide. And that's one way 5E is playing its part to decouple from the boron carbide supply chain from China. Great.
So what is the pathway to commercial production and cash flow generation, and when do you expect to be EBITDA positive?
Yeah, that's 2029. We can be commercially built and commissioned by late 2028. For us right now, we're in the development cycle. The Lassandre, anyone who knows the mining space, the Lassandre curve is a very real phenomenon. Our deposit was discovered. It's been known for, many years. And, for us, we're actually, from a capital perspective, it's 435. There's a $50 million contingency in that number. There's also a $53 million cogen facility, which could always be done off balance sheet. And that's underpinned by about 2 years of mining data. So our basis of design is very strong, i.e., listen, this wasn't done in a small laboratory. This wasn't just picked off of a couple assays. We have hundreds, almost actually millions of gallons of real solution that have been processed, where we've basically looked at the bell curve and formulated our basis of design. So I think, feel good about the capital number, and especially with its contingency. And we have a $285 million XM or letter of interest from XM to go after project finance. So this is my opinion, but I think we can be a $500 million market cap with a major offtake agreement in the critical minerals list, and we're re-rated, and all of a sudden, look at a great example of this is Perpetua Resources was a $2.50 stock or $3 2.5 years ago. They just did a $75 million raise with JP Morgan as part of this new critical minerals fund at $25 a share. They 10x'd. So I think once the market believes there's real commercial contracts and you now have government support with a critical mineral, lift off.
Yeah, that's interesting. The last question, we've got more questions, but one of the questions that just came in is, how are you seeing the funding environment for critical minerals in the wake of policy changes and big announcements by large lenders and funds? Are the terms you're seeing from private sector debt and equity improving?
They have. And listen, like any major mining private equity fund in the world has taken a look at this project, and they continue to monitor this project and have, quarterly or a check-in every 6 months, because they know this project's going to get built. We're different in that, like, we're not in the perpetual, we're working on a PFS update. No, like, we're now getting ready to go into FEED engineering, which will be a bankable feasibility study, and that so long as we have the financing, this will get built. So yeah, I think capital is getting cheaper. Some of this helps with, interest rate environment plays a bit of a part in this. And, I can say listen, it's impossible to have a crystal ball, but we went public in March of 2022. We were public in Australia at the time. And listen, historically, Canada and Australia have been a bit friendlier markets for mining companies. Not necessarily understood. For me, it's always been a bit baffling, because the US loves a good, biotech, biopharma play, which, like, if you look at the risk factors in a 10K or a prospectus, the risk factors between bio and mining are almost like there's no difference, like, at all. Like, eventually you depend on cash flow from a product. One's made in a lab, the other's made in comes out of the ground, and they're highly regulated, like the parallels. So it's always kind of baffled me that, like, US investors are willing to bet all day long on an FDA approval, but not necessarily an approval on a NEPA process. It's always been a little bit of a bit of a conundrum. But I think, listen, we went public on a Form 10, and guess what happened in December 2021? The interest rate environment in the United States changed. Days of, long dated growth equity got sold. Equity risk capital was incredibly expensive, and it was tough to raise money. And I think we're kind of coming out of that cycle. And listen, for us, we will raise additional equity capital. Like, let's not kid ourselves. Our liquidity disclosures are there, but I use Perpetua Resources as a great example. Like, they're on their way to get their debt. They have their offtakes for their antimony. They're capitalized, and, like, investors believe that project. And I think they're a $25, $27 stock now. And I think similarly, our CapEx is sub $1 billion, is 435. It's a financeable number, and we have catalysts here. And listen, I think, listen, we'll continue. Like, for us, we would like to see boron we'd like to see the government reopen, boron get put in the critical minerals list, and all of a sudden, at that point, you see where your stock price is. But I think there's a ton of catalysts, and yes, markets are opening up.
Sure. So, Kurt, from your vantage point, which regulatory or policy developments are most beneficial for 5E's business model, and how do you think, how should we think about the regulatory risk reward profile?
In a word, certainty. And I think that plays well into what this administration is about. I can give you a quick example. in 1999, when I was at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, we put together pipeline policies because we wanted to provide certainty. Here are the rules, here are the regulations, let's move forward. Recently, you had a group of regulators at FERC, commissioners, who wanted to change the policy. Hey, let's get into all this rulemaking. Let's have a long conversation about it. And Secretary Wright, through the Department of Energy, applied some pressure to FERC to say, we don't need to do that right now. We need the certainty. FERC has set that aside. I think you're seeing that type action and leadership right now to say, let's give the market certainty. Let's let them move forward. Unless there is something that is very disruptive to what we're doing, let's not get into changing rules and regulations. Let's have less red tape, not more red tape. So I think the certainty is probably the biggest thing that we need in the regulatory space, and that's usually the case. Tell me the rules, I can move forward.
Yep. We have time for one more. We have a couple of additional questions, but I'd like to get this one in. What are the most important catalysts you expect over the next 12 to 24 months with 5E, Paul?
I think on the near term we talked about today, I think we've put ourselves in the best position possible to get boron labeled as a critical mineral. From there, I think we pitched offtake to one of our future customers. We expect a counter proposal in December. And listen, as part of this process, they didn't like the price. Just the price to bring a new mine online in California. And I think there'll be a negotiation. And one of the things we talked to them about is, listen, you can kick our butts and negotiate us hard. At the end of the day, we want to get lender financing. And so the terms of the offtake need to be good enough that they get us financed, because if they aren't, well, no one wins. Ultimately that customer is buying from a potential single source down the road, and 5E doesn't get built. So I think there's a deal to be had on the offtake, and I think that can be a Q1, because these are big organizations with lots of people, and it's a bit of a process. But the pitch was made 6 weeks ago. From there, I think we're progressing forward with feed. There'll be additional offtakes. There's byproducts we'll produce that we'll collaborate on, and we'll start to then listen. There's the logistics aspects of the project. There's raw materials. Where are we going to get our sulfuric and hydrochloric acid from? And we'll be going towards the development phase to eventually put shovels in the ground and take this project to FID in about 12 months. From there, we're building it. And so, listen, I do think there's, given some of the stuff you're seeing with, Rio and US Borax being under strategic review, I think there could be potential consolidation in this space as well. I think people are kind of waking up and saying they're doing their homework, and they're looking at like this market's supply and demand's a head scratcher. So I think that creates opportunity. So I think it's listen, I think in 3 years we're built. So I think it's exciting times.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the discussion today, and thank you to everyone in the audience for your attention and your questions. We didn't get to all of them. If you'd like us to, please send me those questions. I'll pass them on to Paul or Kurt, and we'll get you the answers. If you'd like further conversations with Paul, please get in touch with us, and we will put you in touch with Paul. Paul, right now I'd like to turn it back over to you and Kurt for any final words, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, for me, I'm just grateful for the opportunity today. I think this was a good opportunity to outline some of the strategy we've been deploying in DC, and I'm grateful for Kurt's time and his mentorship to our board. I think we'll be successful in DC, and it's a great time to be a 5E shareholder.
Yeah, I would just echo what Paul said. The company's doing great leadership, great folks on the team, externally, internally, operations, and pay attention. I think you're going to be excited about this company. And we're certainly excited about the space we're operating in. And we thank you for the opportunity to give a little education to the public about what we're doing and why it's important.
Great. Well, thank you both very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone in the audience, and everyone have a great day.